The Alien Gambit is a wild and unpredictable twist in the Caro-Kann defense, built to shock unprepared opponents. In this video, we break down its most dangerous traps and quick tactical strikes that can lead to fast victories. Get ready to unleash the chaos of the Alien Gambit. In the main position, most players respond with knight to f6, aiming to trade knights and head to a quiet, balanced variation. However, white has a surprising option, the unusual move knight to g5. When black tries to chase the knight away with pawn to h6, white suddenly sacrifices with knight takes f7. At first glance, it looks ridiculous, almost like white has given up a knight for no compensation, but the position is far more dangerous than it appears. Statistics show why this gambit is so effective. Knight takes f7 gives white an impressive 59% win rate, outperforming the standard main lines by a wide margin. Even though engines like Stockfish evaluate the sacrifice as minus 1.5 in black's favor, the practical reality is very different. White's attacking ideas are easy to find. The queen can join the attack quickly, the remaining knight can jump into aggressive squares, and black is often completely unprepared. In practice, it is far more difficult for black to defend than it is for white to attack. Today, I'm going to break down this trendy variation, the 10 main traps you must know, and its best refutation. The idea behind knight to g5 is not new. In the classical Caro-Kann lines, such as the Karpov variation, black sometimes plays knight to d7 before developing the knight to f6, and in those positions, knight to g5 is actually considered a main move. Strong players, including Garry Kasparov, have used similar ideas. The concept remains the same. At the right moment, white can sacrifice the knight on f7 or e6 to launch a devastating attack. For example, there is a humorous trap where after pawn to h6, white can play knight to e6, attacking the queen. If black captures the knight, queen to h5 suddenly ends the game immediately. Using this same theme against knight to f6, the modern Alien Gambit line is less theoretically sound, but it is still extremely dangerous, especially in blitz, unless your opponent is a very strong, highly titled player. As we enter the main line, let me show you one trap. White continues with knight to f3, preparing knight to a 5 check, and also eyeing an invasion on the g6 square. If black tries to guard against this by playing knight to a7, white responds with bishop to c4 check. Black has several reasonable options. For example, they might retreat the king. White then simply castles. On the surface, it looks like nothing special is happening. Black is still ahead by a piece, and there is no immediate checkmate threat, but the danger is coming fast, and black's position can collapse before they realize what is happening. Your opponent now attacks the bishop, but you simply retreat it to d3, preparing bishop to g6 check. Your knight is ready to jump forward as well, and suddenly black starts to feel uncomfortable. Even though black has an extra minor piece, it's not easy for them to stop all of white's threats. Quite often, black will try bishop to g4, attempting to pin your knight to your queen so you cannot continue the attack. But interestingly, white can still play the key move, sacrificing the queen anyway. After this sacrifice, black is lost. If black captures the queen, they immediately get hit with a brutal checkmate using bishop to g6, and that is trap number 1. Now going back, if your opponent is more cautious and understands the danger, they may try queen takes d4 instead. This seems logical. Black gives the queen an escape square, attacks your knight, and also defends the bishop. It looks strong at first glance. But here comes the second trap, one of the most common in this entire variation. Bishop to g6 check. It's a discovered attack. Check to the king and an attack on the queen at the same time. On the next move, white simply captures the queen and wins the game. Here are 2 more very common traps in this variation, and since this line has become extremely trendy, you really need to know them. Quite often, black plays bishop to g4, which is actually a major mistake, yet still one of the most frequently played moves. This allows knight to e5 check, and black loses the bishop on the next move. But the trap doesn't end there. If black retreats the king to g8, you could simply capture the bishop and enjoy an extra pawn with an attack. But you can stay tricky and instead play bishop to c4 check. If black hides the king in the corner thinking they are now safe, that is another losing blunder. After queen to d3, you ignore the bishop completely because this leads directly to checkmate. While bishop to g4 is an obvious mistake due to the knight to a5 tactic, the move bishop to f5 seems much better for black. It is better, but still extremely dangerous. White continues with knight to a5 check. After the king returns, white once again plays bishop to c4, maintaining strong threats. And here comes the trap. The only move that keeps black's position healthy is knight to d5. Any other move leads to serious trouble. Black often chooses a more natural-looking defense by either tucking the king away or blocking with pawn to a 6, but both moves are actually losing. white can immediately strike with pawn to g4. For example, if black plays pawn to a 6, it doesn't truly defend the pawn. After pawn to g4, the bishop must move, and white simply captures the pawn and continues the attack. So this line is bad for black. The same happens if the king goes to h7. White plays pawn to g4, aiming to remove the bishop from the diagonal. If white manages to do that, queen to d3 would be checkmate, just like in one of the earlier traps. If black tries to counter with bishop to e4, white has a beautiful tactic: pawn to g5, breaking through and threatening checkmate. There are two hilarious lines here. If black captures the pawn with the rook, white delivers a nasty pawn checkmate with pawn to g6. Taking it back, if black instead captures the pawn with a different piece, white does not recapture. Instead, white keeps attacking with knight to f7, which hits the queen, attacks the rook, which we don't even care about, and, most importantly, targets the pawn on g5. The queen is forced to move, and once it does, white simply captures the pawn with check. White keeps delivering checks one after another, and the game is essentially over. The king cannot retreat because white would win the queen, and the king also does not want to step to h6 because of the x-ray threats, but white will force it anyway. For example, if the king goes there, white plays bishop to f7, forcing the king onto the dangerous square. After that comes a powerful discovered check, and everything collapses. White can finish the game with something like queen to h5 checkmate. After you play knight to f3, aiming for knight to e5 check, most opponents will try knight to d7, guarding that square. At this moment, you do not want to jump to e5 because black would simply trade queens, end your attack, and comfortably win thanks to their extra material. Instead of knight to a5, white continues with bishop to c4, attacking the king from a different angle. And here comes another very common mistake. Black drops the king back to e8, walking straight into more danger. Black should have played pawn to a6, but many players naturally try to bring the king back to its original square, thinking it is safe there, surrounded by pieces. This is a major mistake, because later in the game, white will always have the powerful idea of bringing the queen to g6 with a devastating attack. In fact, white can even play queen to g6 immediately. It is not the objectively strongest move, but in practice it wins often, because opponents respond with the most natural idea: knight to b6, giving the king an escape square. White shuts this down instantly with knight to a5, and queen to g6 delivers checkmate on the next move. Black has no defense. In some cases, bishop to f7 is also checkmate. Since the Alien Gambit is becoming so popular, many opponents will be prepared, but there is still a way to trick them. Instead of pushing pawn to d4, you can choose the two knights variation. Most opponents will repeat their usual setup, because they don't know the deeper grandmaster ideas. They will still aim for the trade and play knight to f6, hoping to reach familiar positions. Now white can still enter the same gambit structure. After the exchange, there is an important difference. Instead of having a pawn on d4, you have a knight on f3, and you can use that immediately. White plays knight to a 5 check right away. Black had no time to play knight to d7 and guard the square, so the check is unstoppable. The trap here is simple. If black goes king to e8, they lose instantly. The only defensive move is king to g8, but king to e8 fails, just like in the earlier examples. Black is exposed along the weakened diagonal, and white can take advantage of this immediately, leading to an almost forced checkmate.